Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. 2nd Ezra chapter 15, verse 18. For because of their pride the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods, because of the lack of bread, and for great tribulation. Shalom. I want to give all praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Double honors to my elder apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone who have taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chesed, which means peace and mercy to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom in Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Ratazah. This lesson is edifying. In the news, from the RT, U.S. power companies brace for supply crisis. This tells us that we should expect to see nationwide power outages here in the U.S. Babylon the Great, frequently throughout the summer, for lengthy periods of time. Consumer energy demand is expected to hit all-time highs this summer. Why? Because of the extreme heat. Therefore, people will be using a lot more power than usual to keep their homes, supplies, and utensils, including themselves, first and foremost, balanced. And utilities are warning they may lack the equipment to maintain the grid. American power providers are facing supply shortages that stem from increased pressure on the grid due to record high temperatures as people boost the use of air conditioning, Reuters reported on Wednesday. According to Refinitiv data, the weather in the U.S. has already been some 21% warmer than the 30-year average. Federal agencies responsible for power reliability, the Federal Energy Regulator Commission, FERC, have warned that grids in the western half of the country could face reliability issues this summer as consumers crank up air conditioners to escape the heat, the report states. Power companies are worried they will not be able to find the spare parts to fix equipment fast enough to avoid outages, with some of them already reporting problems due to the heat. Another reason why they won't be able to find spare parts to fix equipment fast enough to avoid outages is because of the ongoing supply chain constraints and setbacks, detriments. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, for instance, had to ask consumers to cut back on energy use and turn up the temperature on air conditioners after 6 power plants went offline during a heat wave in mid-May. A month later, some 200,000 homes and businesses in Ohio were left without electricity after a storm damaged transmission lines throughout the state, and the grid operator was forced to cut power in some areas to prevent the remaining lines from being overloaded. The report says that grid operators are currently experiencing a dire shortage of transformers, which convert high voltage energy to the electricity used in homes. And according to two industry associations, some of them have had to wait a year or more for transformer parts. Why? Because of supply chain constraints. If you don't want to deplete your inventory because you don't know when that storm is coming, but you know it's coming. If you have successive days of 100-degree heat, those pole top transformers, they start popping like Rice Krispies. Why? Because of the extreme heat. Okay. Any electronic part that undergoes extreme temperatures are likely to fail. Okay. I'll give you a very, very basic example. Now, in computers, we all know of a CPU, right? A central processing unit. And they're found on your motherboards. Now, if there aren't any heatsink or fans placed on top of the CPU, what's going to happen is that the heat is going to cause it to pretty much explode due to what is known as thermal runaway. That's a very basic example that I could think of, that I can, share with you brothers and sisters. Okay, that's, the kind of stuff I deal with, but neither here nor there, just an example. Anything that is exposed to extreme temperatures will fail, okay? It goes on to say, according to the news agency, in order to preserve spare parts for unexpected weather conditions, utility operators have been changing their maintenance habits. We're doing a lot more splicing, putting cables together instead of laying new cable, because we're trying to maintain our new cable for inventory when we need it. Nick Atkins, head of the Ohio-based grid operator AEP, stated. This includes this article, which was an excellent read. So I expect to see a lot of power outages this summer, which will definitely cause men to invade the homes of one another due to famine, scarcities, right? Because once the power gets shut off, all that food that's going to be in people's refrigerators are going to go bad. So what are people going to go to? Canned goods. And once those canned goods are exhausted, people are going to start to invade one another, invade the stores, and then ultimately eventually invade the homes of one another for the lack of bread. So the cities are going to be troubled because of their pride. In other news, British consumers face sharp price inflation. A rise in perishable food prices and lower consumer spending are to be blamed, according to data cited by The Guardian. Sharp price inflation in the UK hit its highest rate since 2008 in June, propelled by a sharp increase in perishable food prices. This has been brought about by soaring supply chain cost. Why? Because of supply chain constraints. It's basically supply and demand. When there is little of a particular thing, if the demand is high, then the price is going to increase. But if there's an abundance of a particular thing, demand is going to be low. It's just basic supply and demand. Okay. This has been brought about by soaring supply chain costs and a decline. Why? Because who the hell is going to want to pay a lot of money for goods? So obviously, since that's the case, consumer spending is going to be low. And what is it going to encourage? This is when some economists might say, oh, well, we're experiencing a deflationary period. But the thing is that inflation is going to continue to run rampant due to supply chain constraints and issues, and along with many other economic, for the lack of words, issues. Okay. So reading on, it says, this has been brought about by soaring supply chain costs and a decline in consumer spending. The Guardian reported on Wednesday, citing data from the British Retail Consortium BRC Nielsen IQ Shop Price Index. Shop prices rose by 3.1% year-on-year this month, up from 2.8% in May. Food inflation alone surged to 5.6% in June, from 4.3% the month before, while perishable food prices were up 6.2% against last year's figures. Their highest growth rate since May 2009, pushed up by the spiraling cost of fertilizer and animal feed. The BRC data follows the latest figures from the UK's Office for National Statistics, which show that overall UK inflation soared to 9.1% in May, a 40-year high amid record fuel prices and the rising cost of food. The situation is likely to force UK consumers change their spending habits. A lot of people are going to start to eat less. A lot of people are going to start to save more, but that's only going to continue to hurt them, because inflation is going to continue to corrode the value of their money. Mike Watkins, the head of retailer and business insight at Nielsen IQ, says, as inflation accelerates due to rising energy, travel, and now food costs, shoppers are now more likely to cut down out-of-home consumption, shop at a fixed budget, switch to cheaper private labels, and seek out retailers where prices are the lowest, Watkins stated. Still, according to BRC head Helen Dixon, retailers are doing their best to protect consumers against the soaring costs. Retailers are working to find more ways to protect their consumers from the worst effects of inflation. Fierce competition means that retailers will continue to observe as much of these cost pressures as possible and look for efficiencies in their businesses. Supermarkets are also expanding their value ranges to offer a wide choice for customers trading down and providing discounts to vulnerable groups. She said nothing, however, that if costs continue to spiral, which it will, government may need to find ways to help retail businesses support their consumers, which they won't be able to as efficiently as they can, because of inflation, which will then soon turn to hyperinflation. So now let's go back to the scriptures. Again, this is 2 Ezra chapter 15, and I'll start this time at 14. Woe to the world. Woe means destruction. To the world. To the world of who? To the world that is ruled by Esau Edom, according to Job chapter 9 verse 24, which is the current rulership of the earth. And the world is filled with nothing but pride and evil and arrogance and the lack of fear of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai and them that dwell therein. For the sword, and who's the sword? Esau Edom, the wicked. Psalm chapter 17 verse 13 and Malachi chapter 1 verse 4. And their destruction draweth nigh. All right, and what was Esau Edom's blessing? The sword, the modern day gun, its technology, and ultimately those intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are the weapons of the Lord's indignation, according to Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 25. And one people shall stand up and fight against another. So there will be race wars, uproars, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition. What is sedition? Sedition is unlawful insurrection against lawful authority. Men disregarding the rules and laws and regulations of their governments, of their states, of their high authorities among men, and invading one another. Why? Because men are going to be invading one another for the lack of bread and for great tribulation. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. They're not going to regard their presidents. They're not going to regard their governors, their mayors, their local political leaders. But none of those type of leaders will be regarded. Why? Because men are going to be as sedition. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Right, so the course of every man's action, whatever decision a man desires to freely make, will be in the course of his own hand. Okay, if a man desires to go into another man's home and kill that man and rape his wife, his daughters, kill his sons and then kill his wife and daughters, he'll be able to do that because men at that time, during the times of Jacob's trouble, will not regard their kings nor princes. Therefore, they won't regard their laws. Okay? They won't care about 911 being called. They won't care about police and all that sort of stuff. Men are going to be breaking into the homes of one another, taking their food and all that. And the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Why? Because the cities are going to be closed off. Therefore, a man's desire to go into a city is pretty much going to come to naught because the cities are going to be closed off. The bridges are going to be closed off. Everything is going to be closed off. The communities, okay, the states. You won't be able to fly from state to state. You travel domestically from state to state via car or whatever the case may be, from bus, whatever. Because all those things are going to be shut down. The cities are going to be closed off. But because of their pride, so the cities are going to be shut down. The cities are going to be closed off. The cities are going to be troubled because of their pride. Okay, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. So men are going to be afraid because of all the hell that's going to be going on in these different cities that are going to be troubled by reason of men's pride. Okay, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. Right, so a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. Why? Because there's going to be a free-for-all out here. The course of every man's action shall stand in their own power. So a man's not going to have pity upon his own neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil, which means to take. Okay, their goods, to take all their goods, all their victuals, which includes their food and drink, because of the lack of bread, right? Because of famine, which means hunger, a scarcity of food, because the sown places are going to suddenly be found empty, including the storehouses, and for great tribulation. So all these things are coming, man. Get ready to see all these things happen during the times of Jacob's trouble, which we are leading up to. Okay? And as we approach those days, things are only going to continue to increase. Okay, so get ready to see power outages across the world, and especially across over here in the U.S. Okay, when the heat is going to cause these power lines, these transformers to fail. Okay, thus causing frequent and lengthy blackouts, because again, any electrical component that is exposed to a high degree of heat will eventually fail. Why? Because it's not being cooled, it's not being kept under a balanced temperature. Hence the reason why I made that reference of a CPU and a heat sink. If it doesn't have a fan, a heat sink to keep it cool, then it's gonna fail. It's gonna be destroyed. Okay, very basic example. So with that, I pray this lesson was edifying to the elect. Until the next Lord's will, I say shalom to the elect.